Most people think that food franchises are enormously profitable. Buy a big name food franchise and you're set for life. And most people who have this dream, they speak to a single food franchise if they have the money. They never compare these to anything else, and they never know if there were better options out there. Today, we're going to look at top reasons why you might not want to buy a food franchise. So first off, according to a Franchise Business Review report, 51.5% of food franchises earn profits of less than $50,000 a year. Only about 7% are over $250,000. The average profit for all restaurants comes in at just over $82,000 a year. A very small number of food franchises actually create substantial profits, and we see many owners are struggling or just bought themselves a job. So before we begin, if you look on the About Us page at franchise.city, you see that several of us have owned food franchises. Some of us have owned multiple units. We also have the founders of several food franchises here on the team. And I've spoken with hundreds and hundreds of food franchise owners over the years. And most importantly, we have access to all of the data, all of the financials of every single franchise in the world right here in our database. So when it comes to these types of franchises, we know what we're talking about. Now, for some people, in certain areas, a food franchise might be the best option. Every single situation, of course, is different. Your operational skills, your local demographic, the market demand, and all these other factors are all going to make a difference. But in a situation where you have an executive or someone who has business professional experience, someone who can leverage these skills and build up a business proactively, there are many profitable, lower-cost alternatives to a food franchise. You have to remember, a food franchise is limited by the walk-in traffic in the surrounding local area, while these B2B types of franchises, they allow the owner to get out there and proactively build that business, scale right up through networking or local marketing. So that's the number one reason why a food franchise might not be a fit for you, is you're somewhat limited as far as getting out there and building and scaling your business. Next up, food franchises are a huge investment. McDonald's, 1.2 to 2.2 million. Taco Bell, 1.1 to 2.8 million. Burger King, 1.8 to 3.2 million. Tim Hortons here in Canada, about $1 million to $2 million. And this does not include your real estate. People think, oh, I'll just lease the building and it'll be cheaper. These are your costs with leasing the building. You're going to have to add in a few more million if you actually buy the real estate. So if the real estate is not included, why are these franchises so expensive? So just the improvements for building out a Burger King is between $900,000 to $1 million. Landscaping, you're looking at $25,000 to $60,000. Their decor package is $45,000 to $90,000. Your inventory control and order taking system, $35,000 to $110,000. Signage and drive-through, you're looking at $66,000 to $166,000. Your equipment for that Burger King is going to run you from $199,000 to $294,000, and we haven't even covered costs for your architectural drawings, your zoning, your insurance, your working capital, your pre-operating expenses. You get the idea. When you have a brick and mortar location, regardless if it's food or anything else, your expenses go way up. And when you have $2 million invested, you have to sell a heck of a lot of French fries to make your money back. Now, the counter argument that we hear people say is that you earn millions a year in revenue. Now, the mean average sales for a franchisee-owned store in the Burger King system is $1.4 million a year gross. Now, once you back out your royalties, your food costs, your leasing, your insurance, your payroll, you've got 50 employees? Many of these big-name food franchises have single-digit margins. Burger King margins have been suggested to average around 6%. Some locations more, of course, some less. That's about $84,000 a year in profit. Even at a 10% double-digit margin, you're making $140,000, which means it's going to take you about 15 years just to pay back that money you initially invested. Next up, something you're looking at with a food franchise is remodeling. And there's nothing worse As you know, as a consumer, when you go into a restaurant and it's old and shabby looking, but as a franchise owner, you're going to pay for those updates out of your own pocket. We always ask our clients, check the FDD for their remodeling requirements. And most franchises, and rightfully so, they require their owners to update the restaurant every few years. Now, that cost is not cheap. It's usually in the $200,000 or higher range. And the franchise legally obliges you to do so, or you'll be fined or may even lose your franchise. Next up, the food franchise industry is highly competitive. Never so competitive before in history. And thousands of food franchises over the years have entered into this market, and you'll be competing against other brands as well as your own brand, likely just a few blocks away. And there's been a trend over the past few years in many major food franchises where we're seeing declining revenues year over year due to this local competition. And that brings us to the next potential problem in food franchises, which are failure rates. And we all know that growth in anything cannot continue forever. Franchises, like anything else, they've got a life cycle, and we see strong and solid growth followed by a leveling off and then an eventual decline. The problem is the most people, same as in stocks, real estate, and investments in general, they're going to dive in right at the peak just before the decline. That's the heat up moment, and that's when everybody jumps on board. Subway, arguably the most successful food franchise, they closed 2,000 stores over the past few years. And some of these large or highly established brands are likely in a similar situation where you have major market saturation and very few premium territories remaining. Don't forget, if you're getting into one of these super established franchises, you get the leftovers of what's not been taken over the past few decades. Next up are expensive rent. And this might change in the coming months as we see stores closing. But as of the past few years, rents have been at a ridiculous premium, especially in some states like New York or California. All across the country, it's been pretty bad. But in certain cities, we have problems even finding a location, let alone finding a reasonably priced location. And certain cities have a 2 to 3% commercial vacancy rate. A lot of people don't think about this. They go in, they buy their franchise, and then they can't find a location. These are things that you should consider and look for before investing any money. Now, many food franchises, they require special venting and traffic counts, and can be even more expensive to lease than just a regular location. With a food franchise or any brick and mortar store, you could also be on the hook, remember this, for a multi-year lease, which is an obligation often for hundreds of thousands of dollars that you might be asked to personally guarantee. So if something happens to your business in the first year, first few months, you can't continue. You may be personally on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Next up, and we alluded to this earlier, you've got years to achieve your ROI. We've got franchises here that we work with that have a lower investment, anywhere from $40,000 to $70,000, that show ROI in 120 days on average. Now, when you drop $1 million or $2 million into a franchise, you pay high rents, you've got 50 or more employees, your time to ROI is going to take much longer. And this is something you have to consider in the equation. Next up, and people never really think about this, is your investment is not really guaranteed. A lot of people have this misperception that the longer a franchise has been around, the more secure your investment is going to be. And it's interesting, the failure statistics actually show a 2% variance. That's it. Between startup brands that have 5 locations or less, emerging brands that have between 5 to 50 locations, and highly established brands. There's only a 2% variance in failures between all those markets. Now, when you consider the upside that you can get from an emerging brand, such as the ability to own master franchising rights, better locations that are available, and all these other considerations, it can make sense to align yourself with an emerging brand. Now, especially if you do the food route, they can have that competitive advantage that can help you actually make more money than some of these standard brands. And last but not least, spoilage and theft. those are the realities of a food business that are absent in other business like your salons or your service-based industries. So what are some of your alternatives instead of a food franchise? Well, if you really like the food industry, a catering type of business can be an option. It's no brick and mortar. It's a lower investment, much lower overhead, and you can make in most cases, pretty much the same as what you'd make with a brick and mortar franchise brand, and you can give us a call for details on that. Now, if you go outside of food, there are many service-based franchises that operate from a small or home office that can generate the same $1 million revenues as a food franchise for a fraction of the cost, say around $100,000 instead of this $1 million investment. Now, the best franchise for your situation is going to depend on your skills, your exit strategy, your local market demand, and many other factors. If you need help finding and researching a franchise, give your Franchise City brokers a call. You can find us at www.franchise.city. And if you've ever wondered how much franchises actually make in various different vertical markets, you can click here above. Please like and subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.